There are machines that win battles by firing first. There are machines that win wars by carrying bombs, missiles, or soldiers into combat. And then there are machines so advanced, so daring, and so far ahead of their time that they become weapons without ever firing a shot. In the darkest decades of the Cold War, while Soviet radar stations scanned the sky, while missile crews waited for orders, while interceptor pilots sat ready to climb into the thin air, the United States built one of those machines. It was black, long, razor-sharp, and almost impossible to stop. It carried no bombs. It carried no guns. It did not need them. Its mission was to fly higher and faster than the enemy could react, to look deep into dangerous territory, to gather intelligence that could shape decisions in Washington, and to return home before the other side could touch it. This was not just an airplane. This was American engineering turned into a Cold War statement. This was the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, the spy plane that made America's adversaries look up, lock on, fire, and still watch it disappear. Imagine being inside that cockpit. You are sealed into a pressure suit, strapped into one of the most advanced aircraft ever built. Around you, the instruments glow like something from a spacecraft. But this is not science fiction, and this is not Hollywood. Outside the canopy, the sky is no longer the friendly blue seen from a passenger jet. It is darker, thinner, almost black at the top. Beneath you, the earth stretches across the horizon, covered with clouds, mountains, coastlines, and enemy territory too distant for the naked eye to understand. The altimeter climbs toward 85,000 feet. Far below, ordinary aircraft fly at less than half your altitude. The speed indicator moves past Mach 3. You are traveling at more than 3 times the speed of sound, inside a machine built by Americans who were told that the impossible was now a requirement. Somewhere below, a radar operator may have seen you. Somewhere else, a missile crew may be trying to calculate a firing solution. A fighter may be ordered into the sky, but the equation is already against them. By the time they see you clearly, you are already leaving. By the time they react, you are already miles away. By the time they fire, the Blackbird is doing what it was designed to do, outrunning the threat. The story of the SR-71 begins with a fear that shaped the American mind after World War II, the fear of being surprised again. Pearl Harbor was not just a military disaster. It became a permanent warning inside the strategic culture of the United States. In the 1950s, as the Soviet Union became a nuclear superpower, Washington needed to know what was happening behind the Iron Curtain. How many bombers did Moscow really have? Where were its missile sites? How advanced were its nuclear forces? Was the Soviet military preparing for war, or was it projecting strength beyond its real capacity? These were not academic questions. A mistake could lead to panic, bad policy, or even nuclear escalation. Under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, American intelligence had to find ways to see into a closed empire. Satellites were still primitive. Human spies had limits. Signals intelligence could not answer every question. So the United States turned to the sky. The first great answer was the U-2. It was strange, fragile-looking, and brilliant. A high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft with enormous wings and a mission profile that placed it above the reach of many fighters of its time. For a few years, altitude seemed like protection. The U-2 could climb so high that Soviet interceptors struggled to reach it, and its cameras could return photographs that gave Washington a clearer view of Soviet military development. But the Cold War was a contest of adaptation. Every advantage invited a response. Soviet radars improved. Surface-to-air missiles improved. The window of invulnerability began to close. Then, on May 1st, 1960, Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union in a CIAU-2. The pilot survived. The wreckage was recovered. Nikita Khrushchev had proof in his hands, and the political damage to the United States was enormous. The lesson was brutal and simple. Altitude alone was no longer enough. From that moment, the American intelligence problem changed. The United States still needed eyes on the Soviet world, but it could not depend on the same kind of aircraft. The next spy plane would need more than height. It would need speed. It would need reduced radar signature. It would need materials that could survive an environment where ordinary aircraft would begin to fail. And it would need to compress the enemy's reaction time so severely that seeing the aircraft would not be enough to stop it. That challenge went to Lockheed's Advanced Development Projects Division, the legendary Skunk Works, led by Clarence Kelly Johnson. Johnson was not just designing another airplane. He and his team were being asked to build a machine that could live at the edge of known aviation. The first great result of that effort was the A-12, developed for the CIA under the Oxcart program. It was the beginning of the Blackbird family, a line of aircraft whose shape seemed less like a conventional plane and more like a blade designed to cut through the upper atmosphere. The A-12 was not invisible to radar, and it should not be described as stealth in the modern sense, but it did use early concepts intended to reduce radar return. Its Chinese, its shape, its canted surfaces, and its materials all reflected a new idea. A reconnaissance aircraft had to manage how it appeared to enemy defenses. From the A-12 came related aircraft, including the YF-12 interceptor prototype and eventually the SR-71, the larger, two-seat Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that would become the public legend. The Blackbird was a machine built around extremes. At Mach 3, speed itself became a form of armor. But speed created another enemy: heat. At more than 3 times the speed of sound, air friction could heat the aircraft skin to temperatures that would punish ordinary materials. Aluminum was not enough. The aircraft needed titanium and exotic alloys. Its black surface was not only a visual signature, it helped radiate heat. Its fuel, JP-7, was not ordinary aviation fuel. It was designed for a machine that became extremely hot, and it could help absorb heat from aircraft systems before being burned. Even the aircraft's apparent flaws were part of its design logic. On the ground, the Blackbird could leak fuel because its structure was built with expansion in mind. At high speed, as the aircraft heated and the metal expanded, the machine sealed itself more tightly. It was an airplane that only truly became itself when it was moving faster than almost anything else in the sky. The engines were just as extraordinary. The Pratt & Whitney J58 engines were not merely powerful. They were part of a propulsion system that changed character at speed. At lower speeds, they operated like powerful turbojets with afterburners. But at Mach 3, the inlet spikes, the airflow, the bypass system, and the engine nacelles became part of something closer to a ramjet-like process. NASA later described how, at Mach 3, less than 20% of the total thrust came from the engine itself, while the rest came from the way air was managed through the inlet and exhaust system. In plain language, the SR-71 was not just an aircraft with 2 strong engines. At full speed, the entire aircraft became part of the engine. When President Lyndon B. Johnson began publicly revealing parts of America's high-speed aircraft programs in 1964, the message was larger than aviation. It was a statement of national confidence. The United States was telling the world that even after the U-2 crisis, even after Soviet missiles had changed the rules, American engineers had not retreated. They had built something faster, higher, hotter, and more difficult to stop. The first SR-71 flew on December 22, 1964, and by January 1966, it entered service with the United States Air Force. In an era when the world feared nuclear surprise, the Blackbird became one of America's most dramatic tools for knowing what the enemy was doing without starting a war. The SR-71 looked similar to the A-12, but it was not simply the same aircraft with a new name. It was longer, heavier, and built for the Air Force's strategic reconnaissance mission. It carried two crew members, the pilot in front and the reconnaissance systems officer behind him. That second seat mattered because the Blackbird was not just a camera with wings. It could carry cameras, side-looking radar, electronic intelligence systems, and other specialized equipment. It could gather information across enormous areas while moving at a speed that compressed time itself. From around 80,000 feet, it could survey vast stretches of the Earth in a single hour. A mission that would have required multiple passes from an earlier aircraft could be compressed into a single high-speed run. But the SR-71 was not easy to operate. Its power came with cost, complexity, and discipline. The aircraft required specialized maintenance, specialized fuel, tanker support, careful weather planning, mission planning, and crews trained to operate in an environment where small mistakes could become serious very quickly. A Blackbird mission was not just a pilot climbing into a cockpit. It was an entire system. Ground crews, fuel specialists, tanker crews, intelligence officers, weather teams, maintenance technicians, commanders, and analysts. The legend flew in the sky, but it was built on the ground by thousands of people whose work made every mission possible. For the Soviet Union, the Blackbird created a deeply frustrating problem. Soviet air defenses were not primitive. They were among the most extensive in the world. They included radar networks, surface-to-air missiles, command systems, and fast interceptors. But the SR-71 attacked the weakness that every air defense system has: time. Detecting a target is only the first step. The radar return must be confirmed. The aircraft must be identified. Commanders must be alerted. Orders must be transmitted. Missile crews must calculate the engagement. Interceptors must climb to the right altitude and position. A missile must still have enough energy to maneuver when it reaches the target area. Against a slow aircraft, that chain may work. Against a Blackbird moving at Mach 3, every delay becomes fatal to the intercept. That is the key to the SR-71's legend. The Blackbird did not need to make the Soviet Union blind. It only needed to make the Soviet Union late. A radar operator could see it, but seeing it did not mean stopping it. A missile battery could fire, but firing did not mean reaching it. A Soviet interceptor could climb, but climbing did not mean catching it. The SR-71 transformed interception into a race where the enemy often started too late and too low. This is why the phrase "the Soviets couldn't catch it" works so well, as long as it is understood correctly. It does not mean the Soviets were incapable or foolish. It means American engineers had created a machine that forced even a serious air defense system into one of the hardest problems in military aviation, reacting fast enough to hit something that was already leaving. Inside the cockpit, the experience was far from glamorous. The pilot and reconnaissance systems officer wore pressure suits because, at 80,000 feet, the atmosphere outside could not sustain human life. The cockpit was tight, technical, and hot. The crew had to think in terms of altitude, speed, fuel, temperature, navigation, sensors, tanker timing, and threat warnings. At that height, ordinary visual references could disappear. Roads, towns, and rivers were too small to matter. Crews had to orient themselves using coastlines, mountain ranges, seas, and broad terrain features. To the eye, the world below might seem calm and distant, but the instruments told the truth. Mach 3, extreme heat, extreme altitude, and a mission profile that allowed little room for error. The SR-71's operational history placed it near some of the most sensitive regions of the Cold War. From Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Blackbirds flew missions connected to Vietnam, North Korea, and other Asian flashpoints. From RAF Mildenhall in England, they flew reconnaissance routes near the Soviet Union's Baltic and Barents Sea regions. They also supported intelligence needs connected to Cuba, the Middle East, Central America, and Libya. These were not ordinary flights. Every mission existed inside a political environment. Every radar lock mattered. Every photograph could influence decisions made far from the cockpit. The Blackbird was a machine that connected pilots in pressure suits to presidents, generals, intelligence analysts, and crisis rooms. One of the most revealing stories about the SR-71 does not even come from a Soviet pilot. It comes from an American fighter crew. During the Vietnam War, U.S. Navy F-4 Phantom crews flew barrier combat air patrols over the Gulf of Tonkin. In one later recollection, former Navy pilot Jerry Hart described being warned that a friendly aircraft would be coming from the north, a clue that a Blackbird might be exiting a sensitive region near Hainan. His crew tried to pick it up on radar. For a brief moment, they had a contact. Then the closing speed became something far beyond the normal scale of fighter aviation. The radar picture became unstable. The aircraft was too high to see with the naked eye, and then it was gone. That story is valuable not because it proves some myth, but because it shows the real nature of the problem. Even friendly fighters could struggle to process the Blackbird as a normal aircraft. It was operating in a different world. On July 28, 1976, the SR-71 set records that helped seal its public reputation. It reached more than 2,193 miles per hour and more than 85,000 feet. Those numbers are stunning, but they are only part of the story. A record flight is measured, celebrated, and remembered. A reconnaissance mission is different. It may remain secret. Its photographs may be studied in rooms the public never sees. Its intelligence may shape choices that never become headlines. The SR-71's legend comes from both worlds. It was a record-setting aircraft, and it was a real operational tool of American intelligence. No SR-71 was ever lost to enemy action. That fact matters. It does not mean the aircraft was magical or indestructible. Blackbirds were lost in accidents, and flying them was dangerous. But no enemy missile or interceptor ever brought one down. That was the result of design, discipline, mission planning, speed, altitude, and crews who understood that they were flying at the edge of what was possible. The aircraft did not survive by luck alone. It survived because an entire American system, engineers, pilots, maintainers, planners, and commanders worked to make the impossible repeatable. By the late Cold War and early post-Cold War years, the argument around the SR-71 changed. The aircraft was extraordinary, but it was expensive. Satellites had become more capable. Unmanned systems were emerging. Budgets were under pressure. The Air Force retired the fleet. Some aircraft were briefly returned to service, and NASA used Blackbirds as research platforms before the final flights ended in 1999. By then, the SR-71 had moved from strategic instrument to technological icon. It had become a museum aircraft, a pop culture symbol, and one of the most recognizable silhouettes in aviation history. But it should not be remembered as a fantasy machine. Its real story is stronger than myth because it actually happened. The SR-71 Blackbird was not simply a fast airplane. It was a Cold War answer built from titanium, fuel, mathematics, courage, and American industrial confidence. It was what happened when a nation decided that being surprised was unacceptable, that intelligence could prevent catastrophe, and that the limits of aviation were not fixed. It carried no bombs and fired no missiles, but it gave the United States something deeply powerful: the ability to see, to know, and to act from a position of information. The Soviets could watch it. They could track it. They could try to fire at it. But again and again, the Blackbird turned the sky itself into a shield. It was not invisible. It was not invincible by magic. It was faster than the enemy's reaction, higher than their best timing, and more advanced than the world expected from an aircraft born in the 1960s. That is why the SR-71 still matters. It represents a moment when American engineering did something almost impossible and made it operational. It represents the men who designed it in secrecy, the crews who flew it in pressure suits at the edge of the atmosphere, and the strategic fear that defined the Cold War. It was a machine built not to start a war, but to help prevent one by making sure America could see what was coming. And decades after its final flight, the Blackbird still delivers the same message it sent across the Cold War sky. You may see me, you may track me, you may even fire at me, but by the time you understand what you are looking at, I am already gone.